May it please the court, Mr. Arnold, Mr. Kirkland, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Behind me is a picture of Riley Crossman. She was a 15-year-old freshman at Berkeley Springs High School. She was just getting ready to finish up her freshman year. Things were going pretty well with her. She just recently completed her dance recital. She had a boyfriend named Hayden Lacey that she had been dating for roughly 9 months. You're going to hear throughout the course of this trial, it's that teenage love that you have when you're at that stage in your life that she was joined to Hayden. Up until May 7th, things were going pretty well for her. Unfortunately, on the evening of May 7th, her last communication that she ever had with her boyfriend was that Andy is in my room and that she's scared. Those text messages were sent out between 11:01 p.m. and 11:17 p.m. Unfortunately, Hayden had fallen asleep and did not see those text messages, and you're going to hear why throughout the course of this trial. Law enforcement was looking for Riley Crossman. There was an extensive man search for her. Tragically, her body was discovered on May 16th, 2019 over a steep embankment along Tuscarora Pike in Berkeley County. The evidence in this case is going to show you what transpired between May 7th and May 16th. Behind me is a picture of where Riley Crossman was living in May of 2019. Her bedroom window was upstairs. It was facing 522, and you can actually see the crosswalk right there. This house was directly across from Charlotte's Cafe. There's a new restaurant they were constructing there. May 7th was a typical morning for Riley Crossman. She was up before her mom, up before her brothers. She would put on her backpack. She would go to school. She couldn't wait to get to school. She wanted to see her boyfriend and spend that time with him in the morning. Mom, on the other hand, was typically late to wake up, and you'll hear that on many occasions she woke up and the two younger brothers, Riley's younger brothers, actually had missed the school bus on several occasions. But on May 7th, Riley got up, she went to school, and it was a typical day. Mom, on the other hand, Chantel Oakley, who you'll hear from, she was working 2 jobs. Her first job was at a place called Mountain View Solar, and she worked usually a 10 to 3, sometimes a 10 to 4 shift. And then once she finished that shift, she had a second job where she worked at the Log Cabin restaurant over in Hancock. Now, Chantel wasn't feeling well on the morning of May 7th. In fact, she wasn't feeling well in the days prior to that. She went to her job at Mountain View Solar, and around 1:30 at 2 o'clock, she asked her boss, is it okay if I go home early? I'm not feeling well. I need a little bit of time to sleep before I go to my second shift. She had tried to get other employees to cover that shift for her, but no one was available. Her boss gave her permission, so Chantel reached out to her daughter, Riley, and said, Riley, when you get home from school, can you wake me up? Because one of the things you'll hear about Chantel, and I think I already made this statement to you, is that she was a heavy sleeper. But Riley, being the good little girl that she was, said, no problem, Mom, I'll get you up. I'll make sure that you're there for work. Chantel drove home, took a nap. Riley came home from school. At around 3 o'clock, she woke up her mom. Mom, it's time to go to work. Chantel said thank you, got up, fixed herself in the mirror, made sure that she was presentable, and then left to go to work. Chantel will tell you that around 8 o'clock, or shortly thereafter, Riley was texting her. Riley was excited about the next day. So her best friend, Jasmine Cooley, was supposed to be in a volleyball game that day. And Riley wanted to know from her mother if Jasmine could come over and get changed. Mom, is it okay? She texted her mom, is it okay that Jasmine comes over here and gets changed before the volleyball game? And her mom responded, sure, Riley, that's fine. She can come over and get changed. About 10 minutes later, Riley texted her mom back and said, Mom, the game got canceled. Mom said, okay. That's the last time that Chantel Oakley ever texted or communicated with her daughter. Chantel continued to work the rest of the shift. The shift ended around 9:30 or 10. She cleaned up from that job, and then she drove back home. And what Chantel will tell you is that when she drove home, she got home around 10:30, and as she drove in front of the home, she thought the lights were on in the home. She drove around to the side, she pulled in, and when she opened up the door, almost all the lights were off. Her two boys, she will tell you that when she walked up to the defendant to talk to him, that he was in one of the recliners, and she described it as if he was fake sleeping. Something wasn't right. He was acting unusual, according to Chantel. Chantel walked up the steps, upstairs to her bedroom. She looked over at Riley's bedroom. Riley's door was shut, but she could see the light on. And she meant to pop her head in to tell her goodnight, but she figured that Riley was in there on the phone with her boyfriend, Hayden. And you'll hear that Riley and Hayden would spend almost all night on FaceTime. And you'll hear it at some point during this trial that they were connected on FaceTime at one point for up to 48 straight hours. But it wasn't unusual for Riley to spend all night on FaceTime with her boyfriend. Chantel went into the bathroom real quick, walked back to her room, sat on the edge of her bed, and she fell asleep. She was exhausted. She wasn't feeling well. She just worked a double shift. She woke up the next morning. It was a little after 7:15. Again, she was late. She went to school, and she thought to herself, man, this is a little unusual this morning. Usually, Riley comes in and says, hey, Mom, good morning, I'm leaving for school, but she didn't do that on that morning. Chantel didn't think much of it at the time because she didn't do that all the time. There was times that Riley would get ready and just go to school because she knew that Riley wanted to go see Hayden. One child was in 3rd grade and one child was in 5th grade. But Chantel took both of her boys to school. She came back, she made a cup of coffee. She then went up to Lot 12, the restaurant here, which is just right up here from the courthouse. She used to be a waitress there. She had a cup of coffee with the owner. She spoke to him for a little bit. She went back to the house to get changed because then she had to start her next job for the next day. This is May 8th. And what you'll hear is that at that particular point in time, that Chantel went to work. Things were fine. And then around 10:13, she received a phone call from Denise Deaver. And Denise Deaver is the ex-girlfriend to Annie McCauley. Denise had children with Annie McCauley. And Denise and Chantel actually got along pretty well at that time. Chantel had her children. Denise likewise had her children. They helped out with child care arrangements. In fact, Chantel was able to get a job for Denise at the log cabin. But Denise, on May 8th, went to Rankin's Physical Therapy to work out. She left, headed north, 522, was heading home. And when she was heading home, she drove past Riley's house. And she noticed something unusual. And she said to Chantel when she was on the phone with her, why is there a green Dodge Ram pickup truck backed up in between your house and the shed? And Chantel had no clue. Chantel said, well, Andy works in Martinsburg, and there's a gentleman and his wife that pick him up around 5 a.m. every morning, but that's not Andy's truck. He doesn't drive. He doesn't have a driver's license. I don't know why that truck's there. Doesn't think too much about that. Chantel continues to go to work around 11:45 a.m. on May 8th. She then receives a message from Facebook Messenger from an individual by the name of Howard Rorick. Howard Rorick is Annie McCauley's employer. Howard Rorick sent a message to Chantel saying, do you know if Andy's coming back to work? He's not here. Where'd he go? Again, Chantel was like, I don't have any clue. I haven't spoken to him. So Chantel started to become concerned. There was some things that just weren't adding up that day. Around 3 o'clock, she noticed that Riley did not text her at all that day, and Riley was connected at the hip to her iPhone, as most teenagers are. So she's looking at her phone and she's not seeing any text messages from Riley, and she's getting a little concerned. My daughter always texts me about something going on. Whether, can I go stay at Hayden's? Can I go watch a volleyball game? Can I go to dance recital? She's always asking something. So she texted Riley, and none of the text messages were showing delivered on her phone. She called her mother, Debbie Ditto, who typically is at the house waiting on the children to come home from school. And she said, look, I need someone to check on Riley. I haven't heard from her. Riley's brothers, Ryder and Riker, get home. They asked Ryder to go look for Riley at Building D at the high school. Ryder didn't know what Building D was because he's never been to the high school, but he walked up to Riley's room. And what he'll tell you is that afternoon on May 8th, he walked in and he saw a book bag, Riley's book bag, her glasses that she's always wearing, her wallet with her school ID on it, and that her TV was knocked over. And he thought this was strange. See, Ryder had actually been in that bedroom early in that morning on May 8th. He needed socks, and he didn't have a clean pair, and he ran into Riley's room to grab a pair of socks and didn't notice those items when he went in there on May 8th. Mom's starting to get a little bit more panicked. She's getting a little bit more worried. No one has seen or heard from Riley. Around 5 o'clock, she got the message from Morgan County Schools that said Riley Crossman did not attend school today. It's because of this case, ladies and gentlemen, that the school board has changed that policy. Now, when the child doesn't show up for the homeroom for that day, that phone call goes out to the parents in the morning. So when she received that phone call from the high school, she then really began to panic. She called 911. Law enforcement from the Morgan County Sheriff's Department showed up here at the residence. They asked when was the last time anyone had seen Riley. They started to get information from her. What kind of phone does she have? She has an iPhone. Who's the carrier? Is it Verizon, US Cellular? They obtained that information. And you'll hear that law enforcement attempted to do something called a ping for the phone. And what that means is you can take two towers and you can send a signal to your phone, to anyone's phone. And depending on the location of the towers, we can give you a proximity of where that phone is. In the city, they're able to give you a better proximity because there's more towers. They're closer together. Out here in Morgan County, we have very few towers, but we can still get a general idea of where that phone is. The problem is that when that ping signal went out, it never came back. And it usually means one of two things. Well, it doesn't usually. It does mean one of two things. Either that phone is outside a tower location that can pick up her phone, or two, that phone is turned off or dead. There's no power to it. After finding no location from the ping, law enforcement obtained Riley's descriptors, said that she has blonde hair, blue eyes. She was roughly, I believe, 5'5" in height, and they entered that information into NCIC, which is a national database put out there to see if anyone has seen this child. Sort of like a BOLO, be on the lookout for this child. Chantel waited for Andy McCauley to come home, and she'll tell you that when Andy came home from work on May 8th, that he got out of the truck, that green Dodge Ram pickup truck, that she told him that Riley was missing and he seemed concerned, but that he ran inside the house. He came back out, jumped on a bicycle, and he took off. And she texted Denise and it's like, Riley's missing, now Andy's gone. Well, she continued to look for Riley that evening. So did her father, Lance Crossman, and they didn't find Riley. That search continued late into the night. In fact, at one point in time, Chantel and Ryder were out. Chantel will tell you that when she finally came back home here to the house, that the defendant, Andy McCauley, was asleep in the bed. That it concerned her that her daughter's missing and he's asleep. So the next morning, Lance Crossman was concerned about this information with this TV falling over. He went to law enforcement and said, "This isn't like my daughter, okay? She's punctual, she's always there, she's always telling us what's going on. And I'm concerned with this TV that had fell over." They heard about that TV. He spoke to Captain Stapleton and Deputy Shambaugh. They drove out to the residence, and they arrived at that residence around 9:21 a.m. This is a picture of Captain Stapleton and Deputy Shambaugh. That's their body cameras that they were wearing. And they walked up to the car. Chantel's sitting in her car. She's frantically on the phone with Verizon trying to obtain the cell phone records for her daughter. He said, "Did you see your daughter? Have you heard anything?" "No." Well, at that point in time, law enforcement asked, "Can we go upstairs and look in the bedroom?" They went up to the bedroom, and this, ladies and gentlemen, is a picture of Riley Crossman's bedroom. There wasn't any furniture in her room with the exception of a mattress. They just moved into this residence at the end of March of 2019. They had only been there for roughly 6 weeks. Law enforcement looked around. Obviously, you can see it's a little bit messy, but they started to notice some things that were concerning them. Law enforcement noticed blood on a Victoria's Secret ribbon. They noticed blood on a comforter or a blanket. When they flipped the pillow over, they noticed what appeared to be blood stains on the pillow. And then later on, law enforcement, with a subsequent search from the State Police crime scene, found a top sheet that had blood on it as well. And you will hear that law enforcement collected these items and they sent them off to the West Virginia State Police Laboratory. You're going to hear from analyst David Miller, who is a biology body fluids expert, and you're going to hear from Melissa Runyon, who is a DNA expert, and they're going to tell you that this blood came back to Riley Crossman. And not only that, but when they tested the blood, it was mixed with saliva. Saliva and blood in 4 items in Riley's bedroom. Law enforcement spoke with Andy, asked him what happened that evening. And Andy gave a statement to Captain Stapleton. "I was here on May 7th. Ryder and Golden, they came over. Bobby took the boys to go fishing at Cacapen State Park, but it was closed. They came back. Riley was upstairs. She had taken a shower and she went into her room. But it was a typical night, nothing unusual. That the next thing he remembers is that Chantel showed up and he went to bed. He got up, he says around 4 a.m., got ready. His fellow co-workers picked him up at 5 a.m. and he went to work. And that's Andy McCauley's first statement, and I'm going to play that video for you to see. The problem is that law enforcement had investigated all these other witnesses. They talked to Chantel Oakley. They listened to their statements. They went back and they checked their statements, and everything added up. Nothing was inconsistent. However, what happens is, after obtaining that statement from Andy McCauley, that it was just a normal night, Don Morgan showed up at the Sheriff's Department on May 9th. Don Morgan is a business owner here in Morgan County. He used to own the restaurant called Morgan's on Main right down the street. He also has an HVAC business. And you will hear that Don Morgan knew Riley since she was an infant. Times, Riley would refer to Don as Grandpa, even though he wasn't the grandfather. But Don employed Chantel as a waitress at his restaurant. Don employed Andy McCauley with his HVAC business. Things, however, did not go well between Don, Chantel, and Andy. And you will hear that in November of 2018, Andy wanted more money to work for Don. He couldn't pay him more money, so Andy quit. You will hear that Chantel and Don had a disagreement about the way the restaurant was supposed to be run, so she was ultimately fired because they got into an argument. And you will also hear that Don Morgan was renting a house, the upstairs of a house, to Andy and Chantel, and that they didn't even pay the rent, so he had to evict them. He had to file formal eviction paperwork here in this courthouse, and he was able to have them legally evicted at the end of November. Things did not end well with them. But Don, on the night of May 8th, was concerned because in the early morning hours, his phone started ringing. It started ringing around 1:54 a.m., and this continued all the way up to 3:41 a.m. And what it was, and you're going to see these records, is Andy McCauley's calling him. He's calling him on his cell phone. He's calling him on his landline. One of the phones that he has set up in the house says, "You're getting a phone call from Andy McCauley." He was receiving text messages from him. And Don's like, wait a minute, I don't get along with this guy. We ended bad. I haven't spoken to him in 6 months. Why is this guy calling me nonstop from 1:54 a.m. to 3:41 a.m.? Why is he asking me in one of the text messages, I need somewhere to stay for 2 hours? So law enforcement, they collect these phone records, they collect these text messages. Don hands him the cell phone and says, here, I still have them. Take pictures of these messages. I don't know if this had anything to do with Riley's disappearance, but I'm concerned. Those photos were taken and they were provided to law enforcement, and law enforcement said, wait a minute, you know what? Andy didn't say anything about what he was doing on the early morning hours of May 8th. He said he just went to bed that night and he got up at 4 a.m. and got ready for work. So what do? Law enforcement goes back to speak to Andy. This is interview number 2. Andy, what were you doing on the night of May 8th? And you're going to hear from Captain Stapleton, who was also with Detective Camden out of Morgantown, and they're asking him now what's going on. He didn't tell us about this. And Andy provides a statement. He says, well, I woke up, I was feeling sick. I was dope sick. I needed to get some drugs. And what he tells law enforcement is that he goes and grabs his phone, he makes some calls, and you'll see that in the transcript, and he grabbed the money out of the bedroom he shared with Chantel, and he left to go get what he needed to get. And he says he walked. And he walked all the way out to Jimstown Road. I don't know how familiar everyone here is with Berkeley Springs, but Jimstown Road is north up here past the American Legion, probably about a half mile past that. But he walked from the location of Greenway all the way up there because he says that's where he got his drugs. He doesn't name the person that he gets the drugs from, but he says, I got what I got and I started heading back. Walking, okay? And he says, as he gets close to Don Morgan's house, that he sees a state trooper at 2:30 in the morning, and that the trooper had its lights on. Well, there's a problem with that, ladies and gentlemen. State police go in at midnight, and you're going to hear from the officer in the case that said he went in at midnight, and he never turned on his lights that night. If your lights are turned on by an officer, you're making a stop or you're responding to an emergency, and that's recorded in their CAD, their records. No officer turned on their lights. Now, there was a state trooper that lived up there. But Andy says the lights were on. And he was scared because what if this trooper saw me? So instead of ditching the drugs that he just obtained, he says that he was going to go to Don Morgan's. And that was his excuse. So during this interview, at one point in time, Captain Stapleton says, so tell me about these texts to Don Morgan. He says, the text? There's text? He's kind of surprised because what happened is he deleted 4 out of the 5. One of them he forgot to delete, and Chantel actually found that in the early morning of May 7th before she went to work because he left his cell phone home that day. And we'll get back to that later and why that's important. But Andy looks at the officers and said, well, I was working down at Red Hill Subdivision with Howard Warwick, and we're building these new homes, and I wanted Don to get the contracts for the HVAC business. And the officer says, at 2:30 in the morning, you're texting this guy to get him HVAC contracts? Well, that was the excuse I was going to come up with, just in case. Okay, so what happened? Well, the cop didn't see me. I went back home. I used the drugs. I went to work. And Captain Stapleton looks at him and said, did you do anything else that night? Did you go anywhere else? No, that was it. How about the next day, May 8th? What'd you do? Went to work that day. Did you leave that job site at all on May 8th? Nope, didn't leave there. All right, what's your boss's name again? Howard Warwick? What's his telephone number? Yeah. So, I mentioned Denise Devers. I'm sorry, let me back up. The next witness is an individual by the name of Bobby Golden, who is the grandfather. He's not the biological. May 10th was that night, that early morning hours of May 8th that we were just talking about, when he's running around, supposedly going up the Jimstown Road and going up to Don Morgan's. Well, he says he goes to another place. And Bobby Golden finally, after some questioning from law enforcement, tells law enforcement, well, you know what? He came up to my house around, he thinks, between 2:30 and 3 a.m. Why did he come up there? He needed drugs. Bobby says, well, I thought he was going to walk up, but the next thing I know, he drove up Chantel's car. And that Bobby says he sold him a couple packs of Suboxone. I believe what he sold him was heroin, and you'll hear why during the course of this trial. Either way, they're two controlled substances. He says that he walked out of his house, which is directly above Greenway Cemetery, up at the Tower Circle Apartments. That Andy drives up, he walks out, and there's a little bit of a hill, and he didn't want to walk down that hill at 3 o'clock in the morning, and he motioned for Andy to come up to him. And ladies and gentlemen, what he'll tell you is that when he came up and he looked at him, he said, Andy, his hair was soaking wet. He looked like he just got out of the shower. He gave him the drugs, and that Andy got back in the car and drove away. So now we have another piece of the puzzle that he didn't tell us about. I talked to Denise Devers. I told you about this early in my opening statement, that at 10:13 she's driving to work. And there's a picture behind me, if you can see the shed and the house. And she's going to say, this green truck, it was backed up. It was so backed up that all I could see was the driver's side door open. I couldn't even see the tailgate. And she thought this was strange. And you're going to hear some recordings between Andy and Denise. And Denise, she's confused. Andy, why is that truck backed up like that? Why were you there? And you'll hear Andy say, oh, there was nothing wrong with the truck. I just swooped in. You didn't see what I saw. In fact, you saw the wrong door. You saw the driver's side door. No, I saw the passenger side door because you were backed up, and I'm coming up 522. And if you're backed up, your passenger side door is going to be open. And they have a discussion about this several times, and you're going to hear both of those recordings. Law enforcement says, well, you know what? We need to speak with Andy's coworkers. You go speak to Johnny Walter. Johnny is the one that had the truck. Howard Warwick gave that truck to Johnny because Johnny's van broke down. He had it for 1 week. Johnny also lives up in that area where Bobby Golden lives. And what happens is every morning they get up around 4:30, they drive down to that house on Greenway, they pick up Andy, they pick up another person, they drive down to Martinsburg to Red Hill Subdivision, which is directly adjacent to Hedgesville High School, and they wait for Howard Warwick to show up to get their job assignments for that day. Johnny says, well, you know what? It's kind of weird that morning, May 8th. First thing that happened was that my phone rang around 4:30 in the morning, and it was Andy calling. Hey, I'm ready to go to work. Let's get to work. Now, he'll tell you he didn't answer the phone, his wife, Donna, did. And she thought this was weird because anytime they'd have to go pick up Andy normally to go to work, they're usually having to call him saying, hey, we're outside, come on, Andy, banging on the door. But he was so excited to get out of that house that day to go to work. That's what they're going to tell you. And you're going to hear from a relative also of Andy's by the name of Chris McCauley, and he's going to say, you know what? Andy was wired that morning. That's his words, wired. And then he came out of the house, and he had to run back in because what happened was Chris McCauley was at that house earlier in that evening, had taken a shower there, and he left a sweatshirt. He needed to get a sweatshirt. But that Andy came out of the house, and he described him as wired. He went in and got the shirt, and they left. So going back to Johnny, Johnny says, well, we made our way down. I had to drop off my wife. She works at Macy's, the distribution center. She has to be there, I think, between 5:30 and 6 a.m. We dropped her off. We go to Red Hill Subdivision. We wait there for Howard Warwick to show up. And then when Howard shows up, he says, all right, Andy, Johnny, you two are going to Tabler Estates. Now that's heading south from Hedgesville High School, several miles down the road. You're going to work at this job site today. The rest of us, we're going to stay here at Red Hill. Some of us are going to frame this house. Some of us are going to do some drywall work here at this house. And you'll hear that Johnny and Andy drove down to Tabler Estates. They got there and Andy pulled out a bag of cocaine. Andy cut it up, put a little line over here, cut another little line of cocaine up here. He snorted a line. Johnny Walter snorted a line. And you'll hear that shortly after they did that, there was a phone call from Howard Warwick to Johnny. It says, hey guys, you need to get back here to Red Hill Subdivision. That shelf that you put on this lady's house the day prior, it fell off. You need to fix it. Andy took the bag of cocaine that was still there, put it back in the green truck, and they drove back to Red Hill Subdivision. Johnny was the one that was driving. And what Johnny will tell you is that at that point in time when they got back to Red Hill Subdivision, that Andy got out of the passenger side, he jumped up in the back of the truck, he grabbed a couple tools, he handed them off to Johnny, and he looked at Johnny and says, I've got to go meet a girl. He jumped in the truck and he took off. Andy has never, no one has ever seen him drive, but he gets in this truck and he says he's going to go meet a girl. He takes off. Johnny's kind of puzzled. He goes in to start doing some of the work on this shelf that needed repaired. He doesn't even have all the tools to finish the job. So he has to walk up the road to his boss, Howard Warwick. And Howard's looking at him like, why are you walking up here? He says, well, Andy got in the truck. He said he was going to go meet a girl and he took off. What do you mean he got in the truck? He just took off. And time's going by and hours are going by and Howard gets concerned because his truck is gone. He doesn't know what's going on. And that's when Howard, and he'll tell you this, that he knew Chantel from Facebook and used Facebook Messenger to say, where's Andy? And that's when Chantel's like, I don't know where he is. I haven't seen him. I haven't heard from him. May 10th, we heard from Hayden Lacey, and this is a picture of Hayden Lacey and his mother. Hayden was a year older than Riley. I believe he was a sophomore at the time. And he was very fortunate enough. He had an iPhone and he had an iWatch. And I asked every one of the jurors here if anyone had an iWatch. Because what happened was Hayden, when they would text each other all the time, Hayden would take his iPhone and he would delete his messages. Not because anything was bad, but because he didn't want his mom to see the gooey kind of talk that was back and forth between him and Riley. But it was his habit to delete the messages every day. And Hayden remembers a little bit about the night of May 7th into May 8th. And he says on May 7th that he was going to go to, the following day he was going down to Washington, D.C. for a field trip, and that he was on the phone with Riley, and him and Riley were back and forth, and Riley was saying, don't you go down to D.C. and cheat on me with those girls down there. And he's like, I'm not going to do that. And this is going back and forth. That you guys can probably remember you're dating back in high school and some of the stuff that was kind of funny that you said back then. But he finally falls asleep around 10:30, okay? He goes to sleep. He wakes back up at around 5:45, I believe is the time. It might be a little bit before that. He notices his phone's no longer connected with Riley Crossman, because remember, they slept with their FaceTiming each other. Mom would walk in, Lance would walk in on his daughter and see that FaceTime was still connected, they'd be sleeping. Sometimes they take pictures of each other sleeping. I guess that's what they do nowadays. My children aren't that old yet. I guess I'll find out sooner. But that he doesn't know where Riley is. He finds out from the first time that Riley's missing when he comes home from that field trip on May 8th. He thought it was weird that he never got a single text from Riley because that's all he's doing, or that's all Riley's doing. He saw Chantel looking for the daughter on for Riley on May 8th. And he kind of was in a panic mood because he looked at his phone and the only message that he still had on his phone was the word babe, because he deleted everything else. Well, him and his mom are frantically looking for Riley, but Hayden walks up to his bedroom on May 10th, and he's like, wait a minute, I've got my iWatch. Everything that comes through to my phone goes through my iWatch. I didn't delete anything off of my iWatch. And that's when he finds those text messages that says, Andy's in my room and I'm scared. And the mother and Hayden come in and they hand that off to an FBI witness, and you'll hear from her. Her name's Ellen Duffy, and she recorded those messages, and you'll see them later through the course of this trial. At that point in time, law enforcement says, you know what, we need to bring in some additional help. They brought in the FBI, they brought in state police with the Crimes Against Children unit. They brought in a significant amount of manpower from law enforcement behind the scenes. And ladies and gentlemen, you're not even going to hear from a tenth of them during the course of this trial. But they were all out there actively trying to find out what's going on. And what happens is Corporal Edwards comes into the case, and this is the third interview of Andy McCauley. And he's briefed on all this information from Johnny, from the text messages, from Chris McCauley. He knows all this information. And now we're going to go back and we're going to talk to Andy. And Fred says, all right, so tell me about what you did on this date. And, well, on May 8th, yeah. What'd you do that day? I went to work. Okay. Where'd you go to work? Tabler Estates. All right. Were you there all day? Yep, I was there all day. Didn't go anywhere? Nope, didn't go anywhere. Okay. What'd you do that day? What kind of work? We did this. You hear about some LVLs putting together some supporting pieces of construction. Okay. Did you pack your lunch that day? Yeah, I had a roast beef sandwich. No, I didn't. Roast beef was the day before. I had ham, cheese, and a special Dijon mustard. Okay. You packed that? Yep. What kind of backpack or lunch pail do you have? It's a blue one, soft pack. How about Johnny? Did he pack? Yep, he packed his lunch too. Where'd you guys eat? In the green truck. Okay. Did you guys eat lunch together? Yep. Then what? Well, then as soon as we got done eating lunch, we went back to work. We worked there until about 3:30, 4 o'clock, went and picked up Donna and went home. See, Corporal Edwards knows almost the full story at this point. He says, now, are you sure you didn't leave Tabler Estates that day? He says, no. And then Corporal Edwards gives him a piece of information. You didn't go back to Red Hill to work on a lady's shelf? Oh, yeah, I did. I'm sorry, I forgot about that. I went back to there, we drove back, and we worked on this shelf. And also I left to go get drugs. You did what? I went to go get drugs. Well, where'd you go to get drugs? I went to the Sunoco at Hedgesville, right down from the high school. There's a little plaza in there, and went to that Sunoco. Well, who'd you get the drugs from? Some girls. Who? Just some girls I know. Well, how did they know to meet you there? Well, they didn't know to meet me there. Well, how did you know to meet up with them? I called him. He didn't have his phone. Remember, I told you the phone, he left it at home. You called him. Okay. And then what? Drove down. What'd you get? Some heroin. How much? 2 packs, $40. The same as what he says that he bought from Bobby Golden, exactly the same amount. What'd you do? I used the heroin in the truck and went back to work. Okay. And then Corporal Edwards looks at him and says, you didn't get the heroin from 2 girls. All right, I lied to you. I didn't get it from them. I got it from my cousin. What's your cousin's name? Charles. Where's Charles live? He lives up at the Woods Subdivision. What'd you get from him? Heroin. Where did he meet you? Sunoco. How did he know to go to Sunoco? I called him. He drove down. He gave me the heroin. I used it. Went back. And Corporal Edwards lets him tell the story a couple more times. And he says, look, I don't know if you know it or not, but I've already interviewed Johnny Walter, and he just walked out of here, and I've interviewed other people. What would you say if I told you he told me a completely different story about what you did on May 8th? And Andy goes, well, what did he tell you? Like he's all scared, he's surprised. And Corporal Edwards looks at him and says, I know you didn't get drugs from those people. I know you didn't go to the Sunoco. And you'll hear that, all right, I went back to the house. I went back to the house to go get my needle and my Coke. And that story's going to change. Sometimes he's going to say, I went back to the house to get my needle and heroin. Sometimes he's going to say, I went back to the house to get my needle and 8-ball. The drugs change, but in any event, he finally puts himself back at that house. He was doing everything possible not to put him back at the house on May 8th. Well, what'd you do when you got up there? I got up there and I went in, I got my needle, it was heading outside, and I got the Coke, and I used it and came home. And ladies and gentlemen, what's strange about this is the night before, he said he was sick and didn't have any drugs, and he had to go get drugs, and then he used the drugs. But he had another supply of Coke that he'd forgotten about the night before, another supply of an 8-ball that he forgot about, but yet he also had Coke down at Table Estates, and there was enough for them to do a couple more lines, but yet he needed to go get this special Coke from his house. And I submit to you, he's not going there to get Coke, and that's what the evidence will show through this case. But he leaves, and what law enforcement at that point in time, to these officers that are behind the scenes, they found video cameras. And this is a picture of Hedgesville. You can see here is Hedgesville High School, and this is Red Hill Subdivision where Andy was working. And what you'll see on the morning of May 8th of 2019 is that this job site is roughly 22 miles away from the house where Riley Crossman was living. And that law enforcement finds video surveillance of Andy McCauley leaving the job site and heading back to the house. Hedgesville High School has him heading back there at 9:16 a.m. The Bank of Charlestown, which is just right up the road, has the green truck heading back at 9:17 a.m. Murphy's gas station has the truck that Andy McCauley is driving heading back to the house at 9:21 a.m. And then there's another place that you'll see that's called Aunt Jen's Trading Post that has that same truck in Morgan County driving by at 9:30 a.m. And what we find is that when we talk to Andy about what he had done that day when he went to get the drugs, he says he goes up, he gets the drugs, he's there for maybe 30 minutes, maybe 40 minutes tops, he uses the drugs and he goes back. And law enforcement says, well, Andy, we got a problem because we have you on camera going up, but those 4 cameras, they don't have you coming back. He says, well, I went that way. They got to have me. So the 4 cameras show, again, Andy traveling up, but they don't have him coming back. So law enforcement's concerned about this Dodge Ram. Okay, what's going on? Because what they also learned from Johnny and Chris McCauley is that when Andy finally came back, hours and hours later, that the back of this truck had drywall mud spilled all over the back of it. And it just looked like a bucket of mud had exploded. And so law enforcement is concerned about this truck. They're concerned about this drywall that's all over the back of the truck. So they seized the truck. They took samples from the truck bed and they sent them into our state laboratory, and you'll hear from Corin Powers, who's an expert, and she'll tell you what those materials tested for. But what law enforcement was getting really concerned with is after they seized this truck and they couldn't find Andy on that camera, they're wondering, where did he go? No one's now heard from Riley for many days. They're thinking it's the worst case scenario. So they called in a lady by the name of Brandy Eggeman, who's with K9 First Landing. She's specially trained as a handler with cadaver dogs. This is a picture of her and her canine. His name's Rock. He's a German Shepherd. He had been certified for many years as a cadaver dog. She brought up Rock, and they ran Rock around Chantel's vehicle, nothing there. They ran Rock around the outside of the house, nothing there. And they then took Rock over to this green Dodge Ram. And I showed you that area in this prior photo here. See that void area where there's no drywall mud? Well, Rock climbed up into the back of that truck. And here's a video, or excuse me, a still image of Rock alerting to the odor of decomposition in the back of that truck. That same day, an officer in Berkeley County was driving past a store called Hernandez Store, which is on Apple Harvest Road. This is kind of in the southern part of Berkeley County. It's way off the path from anywhere we've been looking. He stopped in and said, "Can I look at your cameras?" I said, "Sure." He was looking specifically for May 8th, because May 8th is the day that we don't have him coming back to work. Our first major breakthrough in this case was on that day. They're having a giant search up here looking for Riley, and that kind of ended because now all of a sudden we have this truck down here on Hernandez Store. Law enforcement found that the time that truck drives by that store is 12:21 p.m. Law enforcement goes down to that general location. There's the location of Hernandez Store. You can see that in comparison to the yellow dots that are on the PowerPoint that shows the location of Route 9. But all of a sudden, here we are now in southern Berkeley County with Hernandez Store. So law enforcement the next day go down to that location. They pan out, and about 4 miles away, they find the body of Riley Crossman. And that body is located, Riley's body is located on a road called Tuscarora Pike. It's over a steep embankment. When they show up, law enforcement notices that there are 2 screws along the side of the road. And those screws are very specific type of screws. They're brown, they have brown colored washers. And what law enforcement finds is those screws were later found in the truck underneath that was driven by Andy McCauley. They were found in Andy McCauley's work belt. And we know that they were put on a roof, we believe May 4th or May 5th, of the same matching style color to those screws. And you're going to hear from law enforcement when they took pictures of that roof. But these 2 screws are right above where Riley's body is found. There's a picture of the screws underneath the driver's side of the truck. That's a picture of Riley Crossman over the steep embankment. Law enforcement noticed that there's what appears to be drywall mud all over her body. It can be seen going down her legs. It can be seen on the foliage around her. And law enforcement takes samples of that and they send that off to the lab. They also noticed that what they think is drywall mud on the top of the road. And they took samples from the top of the road as well. And you're also going to hear from the officers too that during that time frame when they're looking for Riley Crossman between May 8th and May 16th, we had almost nearly 2 inches of rain that had come down during that time frame. And we believe a lot of that drywall mud had washed away, because if anyone does anything with drywall work, you don't leave drywall mud outside. Directly above Riley's body were 2 contractor weight trash bags, and there was 1 trash bag underneath Riley's body. Law enforcement went back and they spoke with Howard Rorick, Andy's boss. He says, "What do you remember about May 8th?" And what Howard will tell you is that on May 8th, when Andy arrived at work, that he got there at Red Hill Subdivision to tell them that they were going to Tabler Estates. And that typically what Howard does is he hands out these contractor weight trash bags at the beginning of the shift, or occasionally every couple days. He used to give the workers the box, but they were taking them from him and they were expensive, so he didn't want to hand out those trash bags. But this particular morning, Andy, without them being handed to him, he walks up to the truck. He opens Howard's truck door and says he needs 3 of the trash bags. And Howard saw him take 3 trash bags and said, well, what are you doing with those? Well, I need to clean up at Tabler Estates. Howard will also tell you that when Andy came back to work later on, not knowing where he was, that Andy kind of looked a little disheveled and his shoes were untied. Something was strange about him. So I told you about the cameras on Route 9. Now we have, tragically, we found Riley Crossman. So now law enforcement is going from the location where Riley Crossman is, and we're panning out. We're trying to find if there's any homes or businesses that have cameras that show Andy McCauley driving in that location. And what you will find is, or what you will hear is that after Andy drives past Hernandez store, he then drives past Arden Knollville. Drives past that residence, and then he drives past a residence on Tuscarora Pike. These 2 homes, one had a Nest camera system, one had a home security surveillance system. They capture Andy McCauley driving by. They capture him driving by at 1226 on the Arden Knollville camera. And then here in Tuscarora Pike, they capture the green Dodge Ram right there, driving up to the location where Riley Crossman's body is discovered. From this location, Riley's body is approximately 1.9 miles away. But this house captures a second image of Andy McCauley. 19 minutes later, he's returning. And you're going to see a video from law enforcement driving from that location up to where Riley Crossman's body was discovered and back. And you'll see the path that we believe the evidence will show you that Andy McCauley drove with Riley's body in the back of the truck. After that, the truck's heading back towards Martinsburg. The truck's captured on the bank, another bank at Charlestown, right before the bridge on I-81. Goes across I-81 and it pulls into Rock's gas station. It's probably the worst video that we have, but it shows the defendant pulling up at 12:51 p.m. and he remains in the truck for about, well, I'm sorry. He gets out of the truck, but he's not pumping gas. He's not using credit cards. He doesn't have a cell phone on. We can't track him. And you'll see him walk around. It's very hard to see, but you'll see the tool box open up. You'll see the door open up, and he looks like he's gathering things around from the side of the truck. But after about 2.5 minutes go by, you see Andy run. And you'll see him. He sprints inside to that store. He throws down money on the counter. He runs back out, pumps gas, and he leaves. And he pulls out around there around 12:58, 12:59 p.m. The next video that the state found or law enforcement discovered is that we have the truck back at the Subdivision Red Hill at 1:44. So we have the truck leaving at 9:16 a.m. and back at 1:44. We're talking a period of 4.5 hours that he's gone. Law enforcement also hears from an eyewitness named Deborah Clavette. She lives out in Shanghai. She'll tell you that on May 8th, she ran out of gas. She was waiting on someone to bring her gas. That person showed up right before noon. She filled up with gas and she went to leave, and she was heading towards Martinsburg, driving up over the mountain. And that as she was going around these switchbacks, there was these rough turns, she notices a green Dodge Ram with its flashers on. And she'll tell you that it was a work truck. It had a ladder on the back of it, and that it was off to the side of the road, and that a person put their hand out the window and motioned for her to come on by. And she thought this was strange, and she'll tell you why. But as she drove past that truck, she looked over, and the person that was sitting in the driver's seat wouldn't look at her, turn their head. But she's going to describe that person as someone with long curly hair that looked like Andy McCauley back on May 8th. Law enforcement also drove from that location where Deborah Clavette saw the green Dodge truck to Hernandez store. It takes approximately 20 minutes. We showed you the evidence that will show that that truck drove by at 12:21 p.m. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is the route that Andy McCauley drove back to work. This is what we believe the evidence will show you. You also hear from an analyst with the FBI. His name is Ryan Burke. He's going to tell you a little bit about the social media records for Riley Crossman and Andy McCauley. And he's going to tell you about some GPS coordinates for that night. And we believe that there's going to be some telling evidence about what Andy really did on the night of May 8th. You're also going to see Riley Crossman's cell phone records. And what you'll find out is the day before Riley goes missing on May 7th, Andy's actually calling her that prior morning at 3 a.m., 3:30 a.m., and 3:52 a.m., and he's blocking his number. He'll tell law enforcement, he'll tell Chantel Oakley, because Chantel questions him about that, why were you calling my daughter and blocking your number? And Andy tells Chantel, well, I didn't recognize the number. And Chantel says, wait a minute, Andy, that's your old cell phone number. He goes, well, the number called me, and I decided to call it back. And I've called people back that have called me. I don't know that I've ever done it at 3, 3:30, and 3:52 a.m. The other thing is, well, if that number called you, it would be on Riley's records. Guess what? Riley never called Andy. So we have this unexplained phone call. Was this supposed to happen the night before? Was he checking in to see if she was on FaceTime with her boyfriend? You're going to hear from the pathologist, Dr. Kubitschek. Dr. Kubitschek is going to tell you that Riley Crossman is a skeleton from here on up. And unfortunately, you're going to see that photo. He's not going to be able to tell you the cause of death in this case. He's going to be able to tell you that it's homicide in a setting of decomposition, and he'll explain to you that way. But when we're back and looking at the pillow and the blood and the saliva mixture, there's a reason why Riley wasn't able to get help. We submit to you that the evidence will show you that Riley was kept quiet that night. And Dr. Kubitschek's going to tell you a little bit about what asphyxiation is, what suffocation is. He's going to tell you that it's a very hard diagnosis from a pathologist standpoint, because when you suffocate someone, when you smother them, there are what they call nonspecific findings. Petechia, red dots hemorrhaging in the eyes. You can have petechia on the heart. You can have petechia on the lungs. You have an enlargement of the right heart. You have an enlargement sometimes of the neck. Sometimes you'll have soft tissue that's disturbed on the inside of the mouth where someone's fighting to get air and they cut themselves. And you have the mixture of blood and saliva. The problem is that he can't look at any of these findings because Riley didn't have any eyes. She didn't have a heart. Her lungs were gone. She was a skeleton. There's a reason Andy McCauley goes back to that house. That's to get Riley's body out of there to dispose it before her mom got home. So, ladies and gentlemen, at the conclusion of this case, the state is going to ask you to return guilty verdicts for the offense of murder in the first degree, concealment of Riley Crossman's body, and death of a child by a person in position of trust, by a custodian, by Andy McCauley. Thank you.
Mr. Arnold?
May it please the court, Mr. James, Ms. Moore. Ladies and gentlemen, I recall that in our voir dire, there was a lot of discussion by all counsel and the judge about the burden of proof. I recall that it was explained to you by everyone on many occasions that the burden is entirely on the state in a criminal case. I believe you took all that to heart. But what we did not cover so well is the standard of proof. The standard of proof in this case, as a criminal case, is beyond a reasonable doubt. That is the most challenging standard of proof we have in our body of law. In our law, we have numerous other standards of proof. We have clear and convincing evidence as a standard. We have prima facie evidence as a standard. We have clear and convincing evidence as a standard. But we reserve the highest standard, beyond reasonable doubt, for these cases. Before the state of West Virginia, or any state, or the United States may obtain a conviction against an individual in this country, every element of the crime must be proven by the highest standard. Stay on the evidence in this case, which is to say, stay on the facts, not the speculation, the facts. This case carries a great deal of emotion with it. As the evidence is presented, your task is going to be to not be overwhelmed by emotion. When emotional response takes over, the prefrontal cortex in your brain shuts down and you make poor decisions and bad judgments. In the discipline of logic, which is in the study of philosophy, there are numerous falsehoods identified, false arguments called fallacies, one of which is appeal to emotion. The Latin phrase is argumentum ad passiones. This is a logical fallacy, and it was known before neuroscience has proven it, and neuroscience now has demonstrated why we have that as a fallacy, and courts have been on this from the beginning. The court system has always been concerned about this, as with the other logical fallacies. And you can see that with your word today and at the end of this trial, which is deliberate. Your task at the end of this case is going to be go back and deliberate on the evidence. Judge McLaughlin is not going to ask you to go back and decide how you feel about it. She's not going to say, come back and tell us collectively how you feel about this tragedy. Quite the contrary. She's going to specifically ask you to go back and deliberate on the evidence, on the facts, and make a judgment on the evidence by deliberation against the elements of the crimes charged. You're going to have facts, you're going to square them to the elements, and every element must be proven beyond a reasonable doubt for the state to prevail. This is largely a mathematical task, not a referendum on feelings. I will tell you to stay on the evidence and what it proves and what it does not prove. We expect that the evidence will not prove a cause of death. There will be no evidence of a weapon. There will be no evidence of when Riley Crossman died, nor where she died. There will be zero motive for Andy McCauley to have killed her, much less malice or premeditation, both of which are required elements of the crime of murder. We believe the evidence will further reveal that there were 2 adults in the house and 2 children the last time anyone heard from Riley Crossman in a very tiny house. The evidence will reveal there was a 3rd adult in the house earlier that evening. The state will put on a dog sniff witness who's going to say that her dog alerted to human remains in the back of the work truck. Be very careful about language. Words matter. Human remains is not what you think it is. Human remains is any biological product of a human being, including the used Kleenex that's in the back of your car. Opinions, and we all have them. We all form them. Sometimes we form them in a reactionary fashion, knee-jerk response, see something in the news, form an opinion. That's fine, but they're not necessarily evidence-based. Verdict forms are. Speculate all you want, but when you're in that jury room, your task is to deliberate. And deliberate means stay on the facts, stay on the evidence. Look, we share the horror of this tragic death. We do. But there's a second horror possible, and that would be the unjust conviction of an innocent man. We anticipate that in this trial, the state will bring you a lot of speculation, a lot of theory, some circumstantial evidence, and imagination. Please do not let this overwhelm you and leverage you toward a conviction by your emotion. Finally, I'm going to relieve you of a task, a job that you might think is yours, but is not. And that is to ultimately know what happened. Someone mentioned during voir dire that this was a whodunit case, and that is entirely not correct. Your single task, as the task of every juror in our country in every criminal case, is solely to square the evidence that's been presented to you against the elements of the crimes and evaluate whether those elements have been satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt. That's it. Nothing more. And if you agree at the end of that examination, not on speculation, but on examination of the evidence, that the evidence does not satisfy the beyond a reasonable doubt standard as to any element, then it will be your constitutional duty to return the just verdict of not guilty. Thank you for having the courage to take on this case, to hold the judicial branch accountable, to hold the state accountable to the burdens and standards, to weigh the evidence, not on speculation, but on facts, and to uphold your oath and our Constitution. Thank you.